Welcome to True Freedom, where we dive deep into the minds of history's greatest thinkers to uncover timeless wisdom that empowers us to live boldly and authentically. In this episode, we explore the revolutionary philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche, a man whose ideas continue to challenge conventional beliefs about morality, suffering, and human potential. Nietzsche's work is not just a critique of societal norms, but also a call to action, a guide for those who seek to transcend mediocrity and embrace life in all its complexity. Through his concepts like Amor, the love of fate, the will to power, and the eternal recurrence, Nietzsche teaches us how to find meaning in a world devoid of inherent purpose. Join us as we unpack these profound teachings and discover how they align with the principles of Stoicism, offering practical tools for personal growth and resilience. Friedrich Nietzsche, a revolutionary thinker ahead of his time. Friedrich Nietzsche was a German philosopher of the 19th century, widely regarded as one of the most revolutionary thinkers in Western philosophy and intellectual history. As a cultural critic, he fearlessly challenged traditional European morality and religious fundamentalism, particularly targeting Christianity. His life, however, was far from easy. From the onset of adulthood until the abrupt and devastating end of his productive years, Nietzsche faced ostracism from the intellectual community and battled chronic illness. In 1889, Nietzsche suffered a catastrophic mental breakdown while walking through the streets of Turin. Witnessing a horse being whipped by its owner, he rushed to protect it, throwing his arms around its neck before collapsing to the ground. This event marked the beginning of an irreversible decline. Initially diagnosed with syphilis, modern interpretations suggest manic depressive illness accompanied by periodic psychosis and dementia, potentially caused by a slow-growing brain tumor. He passed away in 1900, leaving behind a legacy that would only gain recognition posthumously. During his lifetime, Nietzsche achieved little success as a writer, often selling mere copies of his books annually. It wasn't until after his death that his works began to flourish, gaining widespread popularity. Unfortunately, his sister Elizabeth seized control of his unpublished manuscripts, manipulating them to align with her own views deeply intertwined with Nazism. This misrepresentation led to Nietzsche being falsely associated with Nazi ideology. Truth, he despised anti-Semitism, as evidenced in his writings, and held Jews in high regard for their intellectual contributions to European culture. Following his mental breakdown, Nietzsche penned a series of letters known as the Madness Letters, signing them alternately as Dionysus or the Crucified. These symbolic signatures encapsulate two contrasting aspects of his philosophy. Dionysus, the Greek god of fertility and wine, represents the ultimate affirmation of life and unyielding yes to existence. On the other hand, the Crucified alludes to Jesus Christ, whom Nietzsche referred to as the one and last true Christian. For Nietzsche, authentic Christianity perished on the cross alongside Jesus, replaced by what he saw as a corrupted religion obsessed with escaping reality into an imaginary afterlife. This critique was less an attack on Jesus himself and more a rejection of Christianity's denial of earthly life, the ultimate no to existence. The root of human suffering, dividing life into yes and no. At the heart of Nietzsche's philosophy lies a profound observation about human misery, our constant tendency to divide life into binary categories of yes and no. By declaring happiness as the presence of yes and misery as the presence of no, we relinquish control over our well-being to forces beyond our grasp. This dichotomy traps individuals in a cycle of dependency, rendering them powerless against circumstances they cannot influence. Nietzsche proposed a radical solution, Amor Fati, or the love of fate. To truly embrace life, one must learn to love everything that happens, both the joys and the hardships. This concept serves as the cornerstone of his philosophy, urging individuals to become naysayers, those who affirm life in its entirety without reservation. The book that laid the foundation for Nietzsche's ideas was thus Fatista, which he considered his magnum opus. Following this seminal work, he published Beyond Good and Evil, another masterpiece that solidified his reputation as a trailblazer in philosophical thought. Like many philosophers who wrote for a general audience, Nietzsche addressed an intellectual minority. He is also credited as an early psychologist, developing groundbreaking concepts such as the will to power. Psychology, in Nietzsche's view, reigns supreme among sciences, playing a pivotal role in shaping decisions, thoughts, and philosophies. His critiques often stemmed from a psychological perspective, questioning deeply ingrained societal beliefs by exposing their fragility and proposing alternative visions rooted in a renewed understanding of life's value. Liberating ourselves from oppressive traditions. Nietzsche envisioned a world where humanity liberates itself from oppressive traditions, forging new paths toward self-discovery and empowerment. Central to this vision are several key concepts: self-overcoming Selbstberwindung, Perspectivism, human nobility, the will to power, the eternal recurrence, and the Overman Mensch. Among these, self-overcoming stands out as a defining principle. A self-overcoming entails channeling intense emotions into creative activities or meaningful endeavors. Rather than seeking to eliminate suffering, a futile endeavor, Nietzsche advocated for overcoming it, using adversity as a catalyst for growth. Modern society, he argued, has made life excessively easy, superficial, and bright, shielding people from confronting harsh realities. But is this truly freedom? For Nietzsche, such a simplified and falsified existence stifles genuine engagement with life. To fully appreciate life, one must confront it head-on, embracing even its darkest aspects. Humanity's capacity to endure difficulties is not merely a test of resilience, but a source of enrichment. Pain, Nietzsche emphasized, is an inevitable part of human existence. From birth to death, every individual is guaranteed to encounter significant suffering. Yet, instead of fleeing from pain, most people spend their lives pursuing comfort. Nietzsche urged us to face hardship directly, recognizing it as the only path to personal growth. Imagine climbing a mountain. The journey is fraught with struggle, pain, and hardship. However, it is only from the summit that one can behold the breathtaking vistas life has to offer, and only those courageous enough to undertake the climb will ever witness such beauty. Perspectivism, the subjectivity of truth. Nietzsche's doctrine of perspective asserts that our perception of the world and the truths we accept are inherently shaped by our perspectives. Consequently, knowledge claims can never achieve absolute or objective validity. Perspectivism forms the bedrock of Nietzsche's philosophy, emphasizing its subjective nature. No single philosophy, he believed, holds ultimate authority. Rather, each offers a lens through which others may view the world differently. He envisioned a new breed of philosophers, free spirits, to reject the dogmatic aspiration to impose their truths universally. These outlaws stand apart from the majority, crafting judgments that belong solely to themselves. Though they inevitably encounter resistance, Nietzsche celebrated them as embodiments of freedom, possessing an unparalleled independence of thought. Human nobility and cultural decadence. For Nietzsche, nobility transcends mere knowledge acquisition. True nobility resides in living one's knowledge, enduring truths that others might find unbearable. Free spirits distinguish themselves by maintaining distance from people and things, cultivating a heightened awareness of rank differences, and striving for higher distinction. This pathos of distance separates extraordinary individuals from the mediocre masses. And Nietzsche expressed concern not only with individual decadence, but also with cultural decline. He championed life-affirming great individuals, not for selfish reasons, but for the rejuvenation and flourishing of culture. Importantly, Nietzsche did not aim to elevate all of humanity. Instead, he sought to inspire select individuals to rise above the herd mentality, expecting resistance from those content to remain within it. Throughout his career, Nietzsche grappled with existential questions: how are we to live, and how are we to endure life? He viewed life as a chaotic process devoid of inherent stability or direction. Without adherence to some set of values, human existence becomes untenable. Thus, if external values do not exist, humans must possess an intrinsic value-creating capacity responsible for shaping their lives. The death of God and the revaluation of all values. Perhaps Nietzsche's most famous proclamation is the death of God. Contrary to celebratory interpretations, this statement reflects a sobering historical shift. God, once central to most people's lives, had become peripheral. Churches and believers still existed, but God no longer defined the world's role. This phenomenon necessitated a revaluation of all values, a transformative process aimed at transcending existing moral frameworks. Nietzsche criticized Christianity as rooted in slave morality, which resents the virtues of the powerful. In contrast, master morality celebrates strength and creativity, viewing evil as inspiring rather than fearful. Christianity, he argued, fosters subservience, obedience, and escapism into an illusory afterlife. To approach truth, humanity must strip away layers of deception, confronting reality in its raw form. The three stages of self-overcoming. Thus spokes are of test and Nietzsche outlined 3 stages of self-overcoming: the camel, the lion, and the child. Most individuals begin as camels, burdened by societal expectations and obligations. To attain freedom, one must shed these burdens, transforming into a lion capable of rejecting tradition and asserting independence. Finally, the child emerges a symbol of pure curiosity and wonder, unencumbered by rules and values. The child discovers meaning autonomously, affirming life with a resounding sacred yes. Conclusion: embrace your inner Overman. Nietzsche's philosophy challenges us to transcend mediocrity and embrace life's complexities. Through the will to power, self-overcoming, and the eternal recurrence, he offers a roadmap for becoming the Overman, a master of oneself, who rises above adversity and affirms life unconditionally. What resonated most with you in this exploration of Nietzsche's ideas? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to True Freedom for more discussions on philosophy, Stoicism, and the art of living boldly. Together, let's embark on a journey toward greater self-awareness and empowerment.
All right, so we're diving into Nietzsche today. Lots of you have been asking for a deep dive into his philosophy, and especially how it connects with Stoicism and stuff, and how it's still relevant. Like, can we actually use these ideas today? I mean, Nietzsche's this philosophical rebel, right? Always challenging how we think about morality and meaning, especially in a world where he kind of saw, like, no inherent purpose, you know? So where do we even start with a guy like this?
Well, his life's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Nietzsche's philosophy, I mean, it wasn't just some intellectual thing. It was forged through his own experiences, you know. He struggled with illness, was pretty isolated for a lot of his life. And these things really shaped his thinking.
Yeah, and there's that incident in Turin, the one that kind of marked the start of his mental decline, right? It's a powerful image, him trying to protect a horse from being whipped and then collapsing.
Right. It's tragic, of course, but it does reveal a deep empathy, you know, like a sensitivity that often gets overlooked. And it's ironic, his work struggled to get any recognition while he was alive, and then boom, it explodes in popularity after his death. And even more ironic, maybe tragic too, is how his sister Elizabeth would twist his writings to fit Nazi ideology.
Wow.
Something Nietzsche himself, he was very much against anti-Semitism, so he would hated that.
Yeah, it's a reminder that even brilliant ideas can be twisted. Okay, those madness letters, the ones he wrote towards the end, signing them as Dionysus and the Crucified, that's got to be significant.
Oh, absolutely. Those figures represent the duality in his philosophy. You have like the pure joy, the uninhibited embrace of life, symbolized by Dionysus, and then you have the critique of escaping reality, you know, through religion, which is the Crucified. You see, in these letters, he was deeply suspicious of anything that denied or devalued our earthly existence.
But wait, wasn't Nietzsche a critic of Christianity? How does that fit with him identifying with Christ?
It's a complex relationship. He saw authentic Christianity as dying on the cross with Jesus. What was left was an institution focused on the afterlife and denying the present. He wasn't attacking Jesus himself, more like the church's rejection of life on earth.
This leads us to Amor Fati, right? That love of fate idea.
Amor Fati is core to Nietzsche. This radical idea of embracing everything life throws at you, the good and bad, joy and pain. By loving our fate, we become like yay-sayers to life.
I'm seeing a connection to Stoicism here, accepting what we can't control.
Right. Both Nietzsche and the Stoics recognize that fighting the inevitable just brings more suffering. But where Stoicism emphasizes, like serenity, Nietzsche's Amor Fati, is a passionate, almost ecstatic embrace of everything.
So it's not just enduring, but actively saying yes to the whole experience.
Exactly. And paradoxically, this acceptance can be empowering. It frees us to focus on what we can influence, like our actions and responses.
It's not passive resignation, but active engagement, even when things are tough. How could our listener apply this Amor Fati idea? What kind of mindset shift does it take?
It's about moving from resistance and resentment to radical acceptance. Instead of why me?
Yeah.
When you face challenges, ask, what can I learn? Or how can I grow from this? Find the opportunity within the obstacle.
It's a challenge, but also kind of liberating. But Nietzsche wasn't all about acceptance, right? He talked about self-overcoming. What did he mean by that?
Self-overcoming was about taking those difficult experiences and using them to grow, to be more creative. It's not about comfort or avoiding pain, but confronting challenges head-on and letting them transform you.
I always like the analogy of climbing a mountain. Hard climb, lots of obstacles, but reaching the top makes it worth it.
Perfect analogy. And it connects with ideas we have today about resilience and grit. Nietzsche's philosophy encourages us to really engage with those challenges because that's how we often find our potential.
Seems to go against the whole comfort and security thing our culture's all about these days.
Definitely. Nietzsche was pushing back against that. He saw pursuing comfort and ease as a way to avoid the real depths of life. He thought true strength and fulfillment come from facing hardship, not hiding from it.
Okay, let's talk about perspectivism. Nietzsche rejected absolute truth, said our perception of truth is always shaped by our own perspective, our experiences. But doesn't that lead to, like, an anything goes kind of thinking? How do we have ethics if there's no objective truth?
Well, that's where his will to power comes in. But before we get into that, let's clarify perspectivism. He wasn't saying all perspectives are equal or that truth is totally subjective. He was saying we need to be aware of how our viewpoints are limited and be open to considering other perspectives. It's how we develop a better understanding of the world.
So it's more about critical thinking, recognizing that complex issues rarely have simple answers.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And it connects with his idea of free spirits, those individuals who think independently, challenge what everyone else thinks, and reach their own conclusions. They weren't necessarily rejecting all values, more like examining them and choosing whether to embrace or reject them based on their own reasoning.
It sounds like he's advocating for intellectual and ethical self-reliance. How does that relate to the will to power? That's one of his most misunderstood ideas, right?
Absolutely. Often misinterpreted as wanting to dominate or control others.
Yeah.
But for Nietzsche, it's much more nuanced. It's about that drive in all living things to grow, expand, and shape their world creatively.
So not about controlling others, but about self-mastery and expressing yourself creatively.
Exactly. He saw this will to power as what drives us, all our endeavors, from art and science to personal excellence. It's that urge to leave your mark, to create meaning.
Okay, so it's channeling that will to power inwards for self-improvement and creativity, not outwards to control people.
Precisely. And this leads to one of Nietzsche's most controversial and challenging concepts, the death of God.
All right, let's talk about it. When Nietzsche declared the death of God, was he just promoting atheism?
It's a bit more complex than that. He wasn't celebrating atheism. He was diagnosing a cultural shift. He was saying that traditional religious values were losing their hold on society. God, once central, was becoming less and less important.
So it was a sociological observation, not a theological one.
Exactly. He was pointing out a huge change in how we think, a shift away from those traditional sources of meaning and authority.
So if traditional values are fading, what did he think should replace them?
That's where his idea of a revaluation of values comes in. He thought in a world without those preset answers, we have to create our own meaning and values. We need to question everything, examine those inherited beliefs, and forge our own paths.
This idea of creating our own values, it's empowering, but also pretty daunting. Where do we even begin?
It starts with knowing yourself, understanding what drives you, what you desire. It means facing those tough questions about what you truly value and what kind of world you want to live in. and then living by those values, even when it's hard.
Sounds like a call for radical self-responsibility, both intellectually and ethically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where Nietzsche can be challenging, but also freeing. He doesn't give you easy answers. He gives you a framework to think critically, take charge of your life, and create your own meaning in a world that often feels meaningless.
Wow. A lot to process. In this first part of our Nietzsche deep dive, we've covered a lot, from his tough life to his radical ideas about fate, morality, and even the death of God.
Yeah, we've only just scratched the surface of his philosophy.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's great to keep going with Nietzsche. Last time we were talking about his will to power and how people get it wrong, thinking it's about dominating others. But it's really about mastering yourself, right? Expressing yourself creatively, pushing your own boundaries, and striving for self-actualization.
Yeah, it really struck me that this force, this primal force, can be used for personal growth instead of, like, aggression. But there's another concept I'm still wrapping my head around: the eternal recurrence. It really makes you think, question everything.
It's a real mind bender, this eternal recurrence thing. It asks us to think about time and existence differently. Like, imagine this.
Yeah.
What if every moment, every choice you've ever made, every experience, it all repeats infinitely? Not just once, but over and over for all eternity.
Whoa. Okay, that's a lot to take in. So it's like a cosmic replay button stuck on repeat.
It's a thought experiment, right? Remember, Nietzsche wasn't saying this is literally how the cosmos works. More like it's a tool. It makes us confront the weight of our choices and the potential for both huge joy and deep regret. It makes you ask yourself, if I had to live this exact life again, with all the good and bad, would I embrace it?
That's a tough question. Makes you really think about how you're living. Are you spending your time and energy in a way that even the hard parts, you'd want to relive them? Because it seems like the eternal recurrence isn't about just pleasure or avoiding pain. It's about finding meaning in every experience.
You're getting it. The eternal recurrence isn't about just accepting fate. It's about shaping your own destiny and creating a life you'd want to live again and again, forever.
Okay, so it's not passive. It's about creating a life you wouldn't want to change. That's a high bar.
It is. It changes how we see time and value. If every moment could be eternal, then every choice we make becomes so much more important.
I can see how the eternal recurrence connects back to Amor, Fati, and the will to power. It's all about taking responsibility for our lives, the good and bad, and making every moment count.
Exactly. It's about saying yes to life, the whole thing, even the curveballs. It's not about being comfortable, but about always growing and evolving.
There's a real sense of urgency there to make every moment matter. But this brings us to something else Nietzsche talked about, his critique of morality. He really challenged traditional moral systems, didn't he?
He did. He saw a lot of traditional morality, especially Christian morality, as slave morality. He argued it came from resentment and fear, a way for the weak to control the strong, to demonize our natural instincts.
So he's saying those codes are more about keeping people in line, not about helping them flourish.
That's what he argued. He thought these systems stifle creativity, individuality, the pursuit of excellence. It's like they suppress the will to power and encourage mediocrity.
But did he think we should just abandon morality altogether? Wouldn't that lead to chaos?
Not at all. He wasn't advocating for nihilism or anything like that. He was calling for a revaluation of values, a reassessment of what we think is good or bad, right or wrong. He felt we needed to move beyond those old rules and create a new ethical framework, one that affirms life and celebrates strength and creativity.
So what would this revaluation of values look like? It's a big task to create your own moral compass when the world seems so relativistic.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And Nietzsche knew that. It takes critical thinking, self-awareness, and a willingness to challenge those ingrained beliefs. But he wasn't saying anything goes. He believed there are objective values, but we need to discover them ourselves, not just blindly accept what we're told.
But how do we do that? How do we discover those values? There's so much noise out there, so many conflicting messages about what's right and wrong.
It's a personal journey. You got to start by asking yourself the tough questions. What do you truly value? What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of world do you want to create? And then the hard part, living by those values, even when it's tough.
That's a lot of responsibility. It's like Nietzsche is telling us to become our own philosophers, to build our own ethical framework.
You could say that he challenges us to examine our assumptions, to take responsibility for our choices, and create our own meaning in a world that often feels meaningless. Which brings us back to his concept of the Overman. We touched on it earlier.
Right, the Overman. It's one of those terms that gets used a lot, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it. Who is this Overman? How do we become one?
The Overman gets misinterpreted a lot. People think it's about elitism or being physically dominant. But for Nietzsche, it's an ideal. It's someone who embodies human potential, someone who has overcome the limitations of conventional morality and created their own values.
So it's not about social status or power over others, but a way of being.
Exactly. The Overman embraces life fully, faces challenges with courage and creativity, and always strives to improve, to grow. They're driven by a will to power that's directed inward towards self-mastery and creative expression.
Are there any real-world examples of this Overman ideal?
Nietzsche didn't give specific examples, but he saw the potential for Overman in artists, philosophers, creative people who challenge conventions. Think about figures like Leonardo da Vinci, Beethoven, or Marie Curie. They were relentless, made incredible contributions. They weren't perfect, but they had that creative daring and drive to improve.
So it's not about achieving some kind of superhuman perfection, but about always striving, pushing yourself, and creating a life that's truly your own.
You got it. And that constant self-overcoming, that's what Nietzsche saw as the key to fulfillment. It's not about reaching the finish line, but embracing the journey. It's about becoming the author of your own life.
This is all so thought-provoking. It's like Nietzsche gives us the tools for personal transformation, but no blueprint. He challenges us to figure out what a meaningful life means to us.
That's the beauty of it. He gives us the tools to become our own philosophers, our own artists, our own creators of meaning. He's saying step outside the box and embrace the freedom, even though it can be scary, to forge your own destiny.
This has been incredible. We've covered so much ground, from the eternal recurrence to his views on morality and that inspiring yet slightly daunting vision of the Overman.
And there's still more to explore. In the final part, we'll look at his legacy, his influence on modern thought, and how his ideas can help us navigate today's world.
Looking forward to it. Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive into Friedrich Nietzsche.
Welcome back to our Nietzsche Deep Dive. It's been really something exploring his life, his ideas about fate and morality, and that whole Overman concept, which is inspiring but kind of scary too. Where does it all lead, though? What's his impact been?
Well, that's what we're going to unpack now. Nietzsche's legacy, it's complex. His ideas, they've influenced, well, tons of thinkers, artists, movements.
Yeah, he's kind of like a lightning rod, right? Causing both controversy and inspiration.
Exactly. His critiques of traditional morality and religion, his focus on individual freedom, creating yourself, and that whole exploration of the will to power, it's all left a mark on how we think. But that influence, it means there's a risk of misinterpretation. Right, like we talked about before, how his philosophy has been used and misused. What are some examples of that, especially with his sister trying to tie his work to the Nazis?
The Nazis using Nietzsche, that's a prime example. They twisted his ideas about the Overman and will to power to fit their agenda of racial superiority and domination. It's a terrible distortion of what he was saying, which, like we've discussed, was about self-mastery and creative expression, not about controlling others.
Yeah, a real cautionary tale. It shows how powerful ideas are and how they can be manipulated. Makes it even more important to read Nietzsche for yourself, understand the nuances. But for someone new to Nietzsche, it can be overwhelming. What are some key takeaways, something practical they can use in their lives?
I think one of the biggest lessons is the importance of self-awareness and critical thinking. He wants us to question everything, to look at our beliefs and values and make conscious choices about how we live. He wants us to become our own philosophers.
Right, like that revaluation of values we discussed. We're not just accepting what we're told, we're questioning, exploring, making our own way.
Exactly. And that process, discovering yourself, creating yourself, it can be tough, but also freeing. Nietzsche's saying we have the power to shape our own destinies, overcome things, and create a life with meaning, with purpose.
This idea of embracing life, all of it, the good and the bad, it keeps coming up. He really wants us to say yes to life, find beauty even in suffering.
It's a radical idea, especially in a world that's obsessed with comfort and avoiding pain. But think about Amor, Fati, that love of fate idea. It's not about giving up, but actively affirming life, even when it's hard. It's about finding the strength to make even our worst experiences into chances to grow.
I see how that connects with self-overcoming and the will to power. We're not just helpless. We can rise above, push ourselves, and create something meaningful from even the toughest situations.
And remember, it's not about reaching some perfect state. It's about the process, the striving, the constant journey of discovering and creating yourself.
It brings us back to that eternal recurrence idea. If we could live our lives over and over, would we embrace it all, even the tough parts, with a yes? That's what Nietzsche's asking.
And it's a question worth thinking about. It can guide us in how we make choices, how we act, how we approach life. Are we living by our values? Are we embracing everything? Are we striving to be our best?
This has been quite a journey. Nietzsche's philosophy, it's demanding, makes you think, but ultimately it empowers you. He reminds us that we have the power to create meaning, to shape our lives, and to live deeply and significantly.
He doesn't hand us answers on a silver platter, but he gives us the tools to think critically, embrace challenges, and live authentically. And in a world that often feels, well, chaotic, that's a pretty valuable gift.
So to everyone listening, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep striving to become the best version of yourself. Remember, the journey's just as important as the destination. Embrace every moment and live a life you'd say yes to, even if it meant living it over and over forever.
That's the heart of Nietzsche's legacy.
Thank you for joining us on this Nietzsche deep dive. We hope you found it insightful, maybe challenging, and perhaps even life-changing. Until next time, keep your minds open, stay curious, and never stop asking questions.